بيقدر يفهم انجليزي او يحكي انجليزي او يتحاور بالانجليزي. يعني حدا بده ترجمه، في حدا موجود بده ترجمه للاشياء اللي بدها تنقال بالانجليزي، على الاقل لما نقدم البرنامج. بعدين لما يصير في اسئله والى اخره، اذا في اشياء بدكم تعرفوا عنها اكثر باللغه العربيه فينا نترجم. بس في حدا بحاجه لما نعمل المقدمه انه نترجم له للعربي؟ No.
You had a good eye. Okay, great. Well, my name is Dr. Christina Ajrouche, and on behalf of McFAD, which is our nickname for the Michigan Center for Contextual Factors in Alzheimer's Disease, I'd like to welcome you to today's event. We're really happy you're here, and I'd like to begin by introducing to you others who are part of our center. So when I say your name, if you'll make yourself known, please. Dr. Tony Antonucci. No need to clap, sorry, because we just don't want to waste that time. Dr. Laura Zahadny. Dr. Noah Webster. Dr. Wasim Taraf. Noor Fakouri. Where's Noor? Dana Jawad. Okay, so these are all individuals who are part of our center, and just wanted you to know those faces, so that if you have any questions from today's event, feel free to come up to any of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about McFAD and what we aim to do. And that's going to be followed by a presentation from Claudia Schwenzer from the Alzheimer's Association, who will be talking to us about caring for family members with Alzheimer's disease. So McFAD is a relatively newly formed center. It's funded by the National Institute of Aging, and it's housed at the University of Michigan. But we partner with other universities, including Michigan State University, Wayne State University, and Eastern Michigan University. And we're pleased that we benefit from the excellent existing programs at these universities that aim to understand and effectively treat health problems. So what we want to do at McFAD is bring to you the most up-to-date information about Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And the way that we want to do that is every month we will organize a community coffee time like this one. And this is meant to help bring information and resources to the community. So we'd like to commend all of you for taking time out today. I know it's super cold out, so thanks for coming out and being here with us. We'd like to commend all of you for making the time to be here to learn more and raise awareness about Alzheimer's disease. Now, in addition to bringing information and resources, McFAD is also very committed to promoting research on Alzheimer's disease in Arab American communities. Right now, there's very little research that exists on Arab Americans as it relates to Alzheimer's disease. So as part of our efforts, we are creating a research pool. And so we invite all of you, and certainly hope you will, complete a short survey that would signal to us that you are interested to be part of our research pool. So many of you may have already been approached by one of our wonderful volunteers. We have about 10 or 12 of them today from Eastern Michigan University and University of Michigan, and then other surrounding universities. Where our volunteers, raise your hand. Thank you all for being here. So you may have been already approached by one of them. If you've already had a chance to fill out the survey and you want to give it back to one of the volunteers, just raise your hand and one of them will come get it. If you haven't yet had a chance to fill out the survey and you would like to, also just flag one of us down and they'll come and bring a survey to you. Now, just to clarify, when you're part of our research pool, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you'll be invited to participate in research. But it does tell us that you're willing to consider it. So in the future, if somebody contacts you to invite you into a research project, so let's say one of our researchers wants to know more about caregiving in families, how families approach taking care of someone with Alzheimer's disease. And so maybe they'll give you a call and say, I'm doing this study, we'd love for you to participate. At that time, you can ask questions and then decide if you want to participate. There's no you're not forced to participate in anything. It's just indicating to us that you're willing to, and you're willing to be asked. I also want to share with you actually very exciting developments since the last time that we had one of our community coffee times, and that's the beginning of 2 research projects that researchers who are affiliated with McFadden are leading around Alzheimer's disease and related dementias in the Arab American community. The first one is called the Detroit Aging and Memory Project. We call it DAMP for short. And on the table, you might see a flyer that tells you a little bit, 3 reasons why you should participate in a research project like this. It's in English and Arabic. This one is also funded by the National Institute of Aging, and it aims to understand better health issues of Arab Americans age 65 and older. It's supposed to start in April of 2020, so a University of Michigan representative will be contacting households and seeing if they are eligible to be in the study. I forgot what else I wanted to say about that. Hold on. Oh, yeah. And so you can consider if you want to be part of that study. And there's also a sister study that you should keep your eyes and ears open for that will be following shortly after that, that will aim to better understand health among Arab American adults generally, not just those 65 plus. So those are 2 research projects we're super excited about. The final one that I want to share with you is related to a family approach to Alzheimer's disease care. And this is a project that we've initiated that has adapted an existing Alzheimer's Association support and education program meant to cater to the needs of Arab Americans. This program will start sometime in March, so keep your eyes and ears open for flyers on social media and around town. And if you have any questions about any of these projects, feel free to ask one of us after the program. So with that being said, we do have an interactive activity for all of you. So on your table, you should see either a sheet with donuts or a sheet with popcorn. Have you guys seen those? This activity is meant to be a way to challenge your brains. I want to make clear that this is a fun activity. It doesn't diagnose anything. It's just meant to be fun and to engage in an activity that asks you to think about things. So you have a picture, for example, the picture with the donuts, you have 2 pictures side by side. And what I want you to do is look at those and see if you notice the difference between the 2 pictures. They also have one with popcorn. This is meant to be a fun activity. You can do it as a group effort, work with other people at your table. Take a few minutes to see if you can find the differences, and then we'll show you the answers. Oh, do you think I talked fast?
No.
Up to you. Sure. Yeah, 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 yeah,
You're in charge. Go and
yeah,
explain.
yeah. That'd be wonderful. Okay, do you guys need more time? No? Okay. How many of you looked at the donut sheet? Okay, I'm going to show you the answers to the donut sheet first. Okay, so if you compare the one on the left to the one on the right, you'll see the differences circled in yellow. So you can see if you got them right or not. Does everyone check their answers? Okay. How many of you did the popcorn one? Okay, popcorn one. These answers are also circled in yellow. They're a little bit harder to see because the popcorn itself is yellow, but you should see them. Can you see them okay? I don't want to block your view. Okay, so these kinds of fun activities are just meant to remind you that we need to make sure we stay engaged as a way to reduce our risk. That's all this is. Just reminding us that we need to stay engaged. Okay, before I turn the microphone over to our expert, I just want to say a few words about language. As a matter of fact, what I want to do is acknowledge the importance of the language that we use when we're talking about something like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. For those of you who are familiar with the Arabic language, you are probably also very familiar with the fact that the clinical word for dementia in Arabic is oftentimes met with a lot of negativity, that people feel they're being insulted if you use that word. They feel that they're being made fun of. They feel that it's just a put down. And so one of the aims of our community coffee time gatherings is to draw attention, bring awareness and knowledge about this disease. And as part of our mission, we'd like to reduce the stigma around hearing the word in Arabic, because we have to be able to talk about it if we want to address the challenges that come with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So when our expert comes up and talks to us today, she's going to be telling us about what is Alzheimer's disease and how it's different from dementia. And we're hoping that bringing knowledge and awareness and information about the disease of dementia will help all of us be willing to talk about it and therefore be willing to come together and support one another as we are having to increasingly deal with a disease like this as we live longer. It's one of the byproducts of the fact that we're all living longer, which, as my colleague Dr. Antonucci always says, it's like a great one of the great advances in human development is we're all living longer, but then living longer also brings with it higher chances that we may also see Alzheimer's disease. So being able to talk about Alzheimer's disease and dementia is very important, and we're hoping that today's conversation and coffee time will allow us to be able to think about the language that we use and be willing to understand what it really means. So with that being said, it's now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Claudia Schwenzer from the Alzheimer's Association, who will present on caring for a family member with Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, so I have my notes up here. Maybe I can use those. So my name is Claudia. I'm from the Alzheimer's Association. Our office is in Southfield, but we have 10 offices around the state, and we have multiple chapters across the country as well. Dr. Ajruch called me an expert. You're all probably wondering, why is this very young-looking person talking to me as an expert? So I have a master's degree in social work, and I joined the Alzheimer's Association after my graduate program, and I hope to answer a lot of questions that you may have. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is dementia, and when we say dementia, what we mean is this umbrella term of symptoms and signs that there's something going on in the brain, that there is an underlying cause to these changes that you're seeing in yourself, or maybe in a sibling or in a parent or a grandparent. In dementia symptoms, what they tend to look like is changes in memories. So they're forgetting things that they normally would know how to do. Like if they know how to cook really well, they're forgetting familiar recipes. They're forgetting familiar faces, familiar friends, family members. They're forgetting how to drive to a place that they have always visited. Other changes include changes in personality. So if they were usually a very mild-tempered person, maybe they're snapping or lashing out often, or just at times when you wouldn't really expect it. Okay, so when we say dementia, that's what we mean. It's an umbrella term to really think about all of these changes that we're seeing. And when you see those changes, you can say, it's time to go to the doctor because there may in fact be something going on underneath that we can look at and treat. Okay, so there's many causes of dementia, and again, many causes to those symptoms. So we can think vascular dementia is one cause of these changes. Alzheimer's disease is the one that you hear of the most. Alzheimer's disease accounts for about 60 to 80% of dementia, so it is much more common than the other types. Lewy body disease is another form of dementia, but there's a protein in the brain that occurs and that causes changes in balance. So you can actually see different characteristics with different types of dementia. Okay. Frontotemporal dementia is another type, and that affects your temporal and your frontal lobes, and that has to do with communication and logic and reasoning, because different lobes of your brain, they have different functions, right? So logic and reasoning, you have communication in your temporal lobes. You can think of it right next to your ear, and that's where you can process language. Occipital lobe in the back is where you can process things that you're seeing. So you have a function called visual, spatial, and visual cognitive functioning, where I can look in front of me and say, there's a computer in front of me, there's a table in front of me. But as dementia progresses and as Alzheimer's disease progresses, that functioning declines over time. Okay? Does that make sense? Are there any questions at this point? I'm happy to answer any. Are we good? Okay. Okay, so we're going to focus on Alzheimer's disease because it is the most common, like I said, 60 to 80%. You can also have what's called mixed dementia, where you might have Alzheimer's disease or you might have another form of dementia and there may be multiple things going on at the same time. Okay? So it's a disease of the brain that destroys your brain cells. So as it progresses, neurons die. And what this means is memories go away. Maybe they were able to do things in the past and now they're no longer able to do those things because those neurons have died. And in this picture, you can see before Alzheimer's disease starts to progress, maybe you have a brain that's about, I think, 5 pounds, but at the end of the disease, you have a brain that's about 2 to 3 pounds. So you can actually see the changes in the brain as it progresses. And that's what we call shrinkage. So this is how you start. I don't know if people on that side can see it, but by the end, you have a lot of shrinkage and a lot of damage done to the brain. Okay. So there are known risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. I think the number one thing that we often think of ourselves is genetics, right? It runs in my family. What's my risk for developing it? But you actually have other risk factors that increase your risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. There are known genes that cause Alzheimer's disease. There's deterministic genes that say you are guaranteed to develop this gene, but those genes have been identified in families. So unless you are part of these families, there's no guarantee that you will develop Alzheimer's disease, okay? So some risk factors that we know of, hypertension, high blood pressure, if you have a history of brain trauma, that's another risk factor. Diabetes is another risk factor as well. And there was one more that I wanted to say that's in my notes. So hang on here 1 second. Okay. Autoimmune diseases. So think celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, as well as another one, rheumatoid arthritis. But just because you have some of these things doesn't mean you're guaranteed to develop Alzheimer's disease, right? What it comes down to is management, right? And taking care of yourself. If you know that you're mentally engaged, you're socially engaged, and you exercise, you're exercising your brain and your body, your risk decreases, okay? So there's no, you're guaranteed to get it. That's not the case, okay? All right. So the next thing that we're going to talk about are when you notice signs and symptoms in someone or maybe in yourself, how do you know that these things are related to aging, or are these things related to an actual underlying cause to these changes? So we'll go through some of them, and I'll point out, okay, this sounds more like an age-related change, and this sounds more like there may be something going on underneath, okay? So visual changes, let's say all of a sudden now you've had wonderful vision throughout your life, but now you need to use readers, or now you're having a hard time focusing. I would say that that's more of an age-related change. When we talk about visual cognitive changes as it relates to Alzheimer's disease, it means that if I put a piece of white paper on this white tablecloth and I don't know that it's there, that sounds more like a symptom of Alzheimer's disease or another dementia. Okay, not being able to see contrast, that's another thing, okay? The next one is reminders. If you notice that you or someone else is using a lot of reminders, that doesn't mean that you have Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Who doesn't use reminders for doctor's appointments or to go to the store to buy something, right? But when you're using reminders to remind yourself how to drive to work or how to drive somewhere that you used to always visit, that's when we say, okay, things may be starting to progress and it's time to go to the doctor to get that assessed. Okay, and the next one, I have another one. Oh, we talked about driving. Okay, and I want to talk about coming up with words. I have trouble coming up with words all the time, right? We all have work, we all have a family life, we all have multiple things that we have to balance. So there are times when we're like, I'm prioritizing and I just can't think of a word. But actually when the Alzheimer's disease or dementia is progressing, and you can't come up with the word chair, maybe. Or let's say, I always use the ketchup example. So if they look at the table and they say, can you pass me the red sauce? And they mean ketchup, that may be a sign that something else is going on underneath. Okay? So those differences between age-related and stress-related and prioritizing what else you have going on in your life versus dementia that may be progressing. Okay? So if you're concerned about changes that you're noticing in yourself or in some family members, we'll talk about some steps that you can take. The very first thing we recommend is always go to your doctor. Always start there. But if these changes are happening in someone else, we recommend that you have a sit-down conversation with them and just very gently bring it up and say, you know, I've noticed that you're having trouble coming up with words. You're taking longer maybe to say what you need to say, and I noticed that on your dashboard of your car, you have notes to how to get to work. Have you noticed any changes in yourself? And you can start there. And if you say, I think maybe we need to go to the doctor, go with them. Don't just say, okay, see ya. Let me know how it goes. Offer to go with them. You don't want to leave them hanging, right? Okay? So you'll start with your primary care doctor, and they can usually make a referral. They probably will make a referral. You can see a neurologist. You can see a psychiatrist as well. And they'll do an assessment. And sometimes what this assessment will look like, it's sometimes different. They'll put a piece of paper down on the table and they'll say, okay, you have 2 minutes. Give me objects that you normally find in a living room. And, you know, that 2 minutes will pass. And if they only come up with about 2 to 4 things or 2 to 4 words, then they can say, okay, maybe we need to do some other tests. They can do lab work as well. That's another test that they can do. And what else they do is they interview your friends and family, and they say, what have you noticed? And then they'll able to go from there. Okay? They can do PET scans or MRI scans, but these are very expensive. They cost about $5,000, and insurance doesn't typically cover those scans, so that is something that you'll be paying for out of pocket. But they can, with really high confidence, determine and diagnose Alzheimer's disease or dementia without those scans. Okay? Yeah. Yes. Yep, so there's different things that can show up in a blood test, but yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I am so sorry. So the question was, if you do blood work, if they do blood work, does something show up in your blood work? And yes, there are things that they can test for. Off the top of my head, I don't know what they are. But generally, when you go to the doctor to have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or dementia, the goal is to rule out Alzheimer's disease or dementia. They want to make sure that there isn't something else going on that they can treat. So if, let's say, for example, you go and it turns out the changes you're seeing are because of a medication that you're taking. Okay, well, that rules out Alzheimer's disease and dementia, right? It could also be maybe you're not getting the nutrition that you need. So that's where those interviews with friends and family really come in handy, and that blood work as well. Okay, so the goal is to rule it out. No, so the question was, as the disease progresses and the brain shrinks, do you notice a difference in the size of like their head or anything? No, because the skull stays the same. It's the brain itself that's shrinking. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay. Are there any others before we go on? You good? Okay. Yes, please. So does medication affect the progression of the disease? Or so if you have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or another dementia and you're taking, let's say, like Aricept, the treatments that we currently have on the market, they don't slow down the progression of the disease. All they do is mask the symptoms and make it easier for that person to carry on with their daily routine. Hmm. Okay. 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 Right. Okay. Interesting. I see what you're saying. Yes. Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like you did. Absolutely. So, right. Yes, absolutely. And when you go for a diagnosis, oftentimes there are errors that can happen, certainly, but different things can look like other things as well. So that's why it's important to keep going back. But you noticed, right, like once this treatment started, it just, nothing seemed to match up. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so the disease itself is when your neurons are dying, right? But if you're taking a medication that can mimic the symptoms of dementia. I should also say here too that urinary tract infections, really common with dementia, but that can also mimic dementia as well. Okay, so there's different things, and that's why you go and you get different tests done, and you want to be exhaustive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So I don't know that I can speak to the spiritual relationship, but certainly um, if the person is, spiritual and faithful, they're using their brain, right? It's a form of like mental function and mental stimulation, which would help them down the line, right? And help them as they go. So certainly, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly. Yeah. That sounds like a good way to end it. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So we'll go over caregiving during the early and the middle stages. I didn't put anything in here for the late stages. Yes. Yes, go right ahead. Right. Yes. Right. hmm hmm So the question was, if, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you take pain medication, does it have any effect on, do you mean like the symptoms of dementia or? hmm So I don't know of any research. Yeah. So I don't know of any research that has looked at pain medication and the symptoms of dementia. But if someone with dementia is in pain and their behaviors start to become more challenging, so they're frustrated and they're kind of taking it out on you, if you have that pain addressed, those symptoms decrease. So I guess my answer is, like he said, more research is needed. But I can get back to you on that one if you are interested. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, yeah. Okay. Dr. Edrich is reining me in. Okay. Keeping me on track. Okay, so we'll go over communication and caregiving during the early and middle stages. Okay. All right, so when you're in the early stages, let's say you're able to catch it early enough and you really haven't noticed the progression of any changes, but you certainly have noticed, they're having difficulty coming up with their words, or it's harder to communicate, and maybe they have some trouble doing familiar tasks, or they're taking a little bit longer. The best thing that I can tell you in this stage is find humor with each other, right? Because sometimes some things are genuinely funny. I can give you an example. My grandfather once tried to call my mom with the remote control, and my mom was right there, and she goes, "It's a remote," and they laughed about it. So I don't know. I thought it was cute. Um, and the next thing is, at this stage, hopefully you're starting to plan for the future. Planning is essential at this stage. You don't want to wait until it's too late. I've heard of many families who, they don't plan until, the middle stage or towards the later stages, and they end up in court. It really is devastating to the family. So you start early. And always involve the person when you're planning. We have the phrase "nothing about me without me," and that actually comes from, I think it's a foundation for autism. So nothing about me without me. Involving them in what are their wishes as the disease progresses, when they're no longer able to communicate, what do they hope happens, and what do they feel is essential to their dignity as a person. So communication in the middle stages, by this point, the changes that you've noticed have really started to progress. Some language may still be there, some language may not be there at all. They may be communicating to you, but it may be a little more like erratic. Their behavior may be different, and their tastes may have completely changed as well. So one thing that they didn't like in the past, maybe they now enjoy. So you just kind of have to roll with it. So when you're communicating with someone who's in the middle stages, we always recommend one person at a time, talking to them. You're approaching them gently, and you're approaching them from the front. And you're always at eye level, and the best way to really go about it is to make sure that they feel reassured. Let them know that you're with them. And if they're frustrated, which happens often, you just tell them, "I know you're frustrated," and you validate the way that they're feeling. And you sit with them and you say, "I can feel your frustration, I know you're frustrated, and I'm here with you." And a key thing is say their name, right? So if you say, "It's me, your daughter, hi dad," or however it goes, they may not be able to orient you as their child. So you can say, "Hi," their name, "I'm your daughter," or "It's your daughter, Claudia," right? So you're orienting yourself to them, okay? And you're being gentle about it. And another thing that we always say is try not to correct. Our natural inclination in the world of dementia is to correct, right? They're telling you it's a sunny 80-degree day outside, and you're like, "It's actually 20 degrees outside." And you can't go outside in your flip-flops and your swimsuit, even though they really want to go outside. Instead, what you could do is say, You will address the emotion that they're feeling and making sure that they're safe. Safety is priority, right? So they have their flip-flops on and their swimsuit on, and you say, it sounds like you really want to go to the beach, and you can ask them open-ended questions. So it's this kind of way to redirect, right, what's going on, and you say, tell me about a time that you went to the beach, or what do you love about the beach? You're asking them these open-ended questions to get them talking and really making them feel these positive emotions that they're associating with whatever they're feeling. And you can do the same thing for, you may hear often, I want to go home, right? And what that means sometimes is they don't really feel safe or comfortable in their environment. But what you can do is, if they're talking about a home that they had in the past, maybe you can pull out a picture, or you can have them talk about what that means to them. Say, you're talking about home a lot. What does home mean to you? Or what does your home look like? So you're asking these open-ended, they're called beautiful questions. Okay? So I hope that was helpful. All right, so we're going to talk about what it means to be a healthy caregiver. Christine, how much time do I have? Okay, that's fine. All right, so caregiving is a 24/7 job. Even if you use respite services, you still have anxiety and worry in the back of your mind. It doesn't go away. Even if somebody else is taking care of that person for a little bit of time, you still are feeling that stress. So if you are experiencing stress, symptoms that you may experience, blurred vision, your heart is pounding, you become frustrated or like tense for no reason, or maybe there is a trigger for that tense feeling. Personality changes, maybe you went to the doctor and now you have high blood pressure, right? These are all symptoms that caregiving, because it is a valuable service and it goes on for so long, especially with Alzheimer's disease and dementia, it takes a toll on you mentally, and it takes a toll on you physically as well. So it's key to make sure that you're managing that stress and that anxiety that you're feeling as you're taking care of someone. Okay? And if you are able to manage that stress and take care of yourself, you are able to provide better care for the person that you're caring for, which is our ultimate goal. Okay? And I actually have materials on my table. It'll look like this, if I can show you. It's called Take Care of Yourself, How to Recognize and Manage Caregiver Stress. And there's 10 signs that I can just briefly touch on with you, how to know when you're experiencing stress, right? So denial is one. You may see a lot of denial in other family members or friends who just don't want to accept that this disease is progressing and that these changes are going to happen. Anxiety, depression, okay, sleeplessness, and feeling like you're snapping at people, that irritability, that quick irritability. Okay? Wait, I have to advance my slide here. Okay. So I'm going to actually show you another one too before I move on. Managing caregiver stress, there's another one. It's attached to that sheet. Another 10 ways to manage that stress. And the biggest one that I can tell you is get help when you need it and learn to accept changes as they happen. You need to take time to process and say, okay, my grandfather can no longer feed himself. Now I have to be the one to feed him. You have to take time to process that. You can't just say, okay, time to move on. Maybe you need to sit down and sit with that for a little bit and say, okay, for his sake and for my sake, we have to continue on. And that's the way that it rolls. That's the way dementia goes. Okay? All right, so I'm going to talk just really briefly about the Alzheimer's Association where I work. So they actually pay me to go out and talk to everyone about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, which I enjoy because I get paid. So we have something, it's called our 24/7 helpline, and this is the number up here. And when you call, you speak with a master's level clinician. So they will be social workers or they'll be other types of clinicians. And people call this line for all sorts of things related to caregiving. Maybe there's a challenging behavior that they don't know how to respond to. It's been used in crisis, like times of crisis. I've had people call, 'cause sometimes I do the helpline as well. I've had people call just to vent. People with Alzheimer's disease and dementia also call this number. I speak to people with Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and sometimes they just want to talk to someone because maybe nobody's around at that time. We have different support groups and education programs. We have early stage and caregiver events as well. We have a thing called Community Connect, where you can actually take, it's you, the care partner, and the person that you're caring for. You go in a group and you go to, I think, the DIA, and you go to Henry Ford and all of these different places, Greenfield Village, I think, as well. So we have a bunch of different events. Education programs, that's what I do. And we have wonderful community educators. There's one up and coming in the audience here. I'm not going to call her out. So we provide education for everyone, and they do a wonderful job, and I'm really thankful for them. Support groups, like I said, a lot of different support groups in the area too. And I do want to mention that our 24/7 helpline, we have what's called a language line. So if you don't speak English, or if you would prefer a different language, you can call and ask for that language, and it just happens right there. Okay? So I think that's the end of what I want to say. Okay. Thanks for listening. Whew. I know it was a lot of information. Is there time for questions? Yeah? Okay. So it was a lot of information that was just kind of like thrown at you. Are there any questions? Yeah. Sure. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, how does stress play a role in the development of dementia or Alzheimer's disease? So when you think about stress and the toll that it has on your body, what it affects, right, is your cardiovascular system, and it affects your mind. So when you have, cardiovascular disease, maybe you have long-term stress, and now you have hypertension, and then you go on to develop heart disease. You can develop what's called vascular dementia, and there's different ways that happens. Some of them are because of strokes, but if stress plays a role in your cardiovascular system, that ultimately affects your cells and your brain health. Does that answer your question? Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes. Mm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, is there an app or a set of questions where you can test yourself to see if there's something going on underneath? Is that the question that you were asking? So I would say that it's never good to self-diagnose, because then you may just kind of scare yourself. And if you were interested in doing an actual assessment, going to the doctor. But in terms of if you do find something online, because I don't know of any, and there's nothing that we put out there in terms of here's a self-test to see your cognitive ability, go to the doctor certainly, but I wouldn't necessarily, unless they're put out by like a research institute, or if they're put out by your doctor's office, I wouldn't really trust those tests, because you just may cause yourself a lot of worry. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Oh, so the question is there any connection between hearing loss and dementia? I don't think so. I don't have an exact answer, and I would have to look into it. I don't know if anyone else has an answer for that, but no, because I think if there was a connection between hearing loss and dementia, we would see a rise in Alzheimer's disease in the deaf community, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. Yeah. Please go ahead.
So let me offer a comment about that. Causally, if you're asking, is there a causal link between hearing loss and dementia? I would feel comfortable saying no. But there is another kind of causal link in the sense that we are talking about maintaining an engagement, being involved with people in a community, activities, things that keep you stimulated. The problem with hearing loss is people tend to withdraw. They're not able to engage. So it's not causal in the sense of cause effect, but it is causal in the sense that it creates a risk circumstance that leaves you more likely. I mean, not more likely in the causal sense of that one thing causes another, but it causes a circumstance which may increase the likelihood of Alzheimer's by any kind of dementia. So in that direction, no. So the question is, if you see hearing loss or experience hearing loss with a loved one, or even somebody you don't love, might care about, should you then should you consider that as a symptom of dementia of any sort? That I would say no to. But because hearing loss is associated with a cascade of negative events that create a risk factor, that create risk circumstances, I would say yes, take care of that. Go to a hearing clinic or a physician, or get it taken care of to the degree that you can't. What we haven't figured out, and there is often hearing loss with age, we can help with some of it, we can't help with all of it, but it's really a risk factor for a lot of deteriorating events because people start withdrawing. They don't want to have to say, huh, what'd you say? Could you say it over again? I'm particularly sensitive to this because I have hearing loss.
Thank you. No. So the question was, has there been any cases or research about Alzheimer's disease being reversed? And the answer is no. No. It is a progressive disease, and it is ultimately fatal. So. Yeah. So I do know that we have seen changes related to dementia as early as 30. And that falls under the younger onset Alzheimer's disease and dementia. But 30. Average? Well, so there's younger onset, which occurs around the age of 50. And then after that, it would be Alzheimer's disease. There wouldn't be that younger onset. But average age, I don't know that I have an answer for that. Yeah. Good. Yes. Oh, good. Okay. There you go. Yeah, but that's diagnosis. So there could be changes well before that. Yeah. Sure. We had, I think, multiple questions going on. Okay. 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 So the question was, are there different levels or stages, is what we say, of Alzheimer's disease, and or is it all or none? So once you receive that diagnosis, you have Alzheimer's disease, but you go through different stages. So early, middle, late. You might also hear in the clinical sense mild, moderate, or severe, and that just, kind of tells you where you are in the progression. And the later you are in your stage, so if they say you're in late stage, then you're progressing towards the end of your journey with Alzheimer's disease. So Does that answer your question? I often hear people say, I have a touch of dementia. And I'm like, what does that mean? You have a touch of dementia. Okay. And there was one other question over here, but yeah. One more time for me. So the question was, is there a relationship between age and Alzheimer's disease? And the answer is yes. The older you get, the more at risk you are for developing Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Okay? Mm. Yes, please. Mm. Mhm. Okay. Yep. Mhm. Okay. Mhm. Suicide. Okay. Mhm. Mm. Yeah. So is there a relationship between the side effects of a medication and the development of Alzheimer's disease? I don't know of any research about that, but if you're experiencing if a side effect is high blood pressure, that's still stress on your cardiovascular system, right? But certainly if you're experiencing some side effects like that of a medication, maybe you need to go to the doctor and think about what other treatments exist so that you don't have that stress on your body. But is there research? I don't think so, no. I haven't heard of any. Mhm. Yes. Vitamins? Mm. So, yeah. Okay. So it's kind of a two-layered question. So the first one was, are there any vitamins or nutrition to help delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease, and what measures can you take to delay the onset of the disease? So in terms of preventative vitamins, off the top of my head, I can't think of any. I don't know if anyone has any other information. But in terms of preventative measures, in your name, one more time. Because I can speak to this. I just want to credit what you said. Tony. Oh, okay. Sure.
So what we recommend in terms of thinking preventatively is all the things that you do to stay healthy. So to the degree that vitamins will keep you healthy, to the degree that good nutrition keeps you healthy, the same way not smoking keeps you healthy, all of those things that keep you healthy, it decrease the likelihood. Now, it is true that we don't have that causal mechanism, the direct link, but we do know that people who are less healthy, who are in poor nutrition, who have had engaged in a lot of risk-taking behaviors, they're at greater risk. So all the things that you've learned about to do good, to stay healthy, to keep your mind and body healthy, they'll help in this regard as well. And I want to say, Claudia did a great job of giving you a good sense of what we know. What I want to say is that we're at the pioneering stages. As Dr. Ajrush mentioned, we are benefiting from the success of long life, of living longer. So when everybody died at 50, we didn't have a lot of Alzheimer's. Now living to 80, 90, we have it more. So it's a challenge. And you know, I believe that we will overcome this challenge, that we will eventually understand how to deal with it. We are all in the pioneering stages of benefiting from the advantage of longevity and facing the new challenges. So nothing is written in stone. We have some indicators of what helps, what doesn't help. But I think the future holds more information, and you'll be at the pioneering level. One of the things I wanted to say is all of you who were kind enough to come out, we'd like you to go forth and multiply in the sense of tell other people what you learned today. everybody has a family member who might be worried about this or experiencing these stressors. Share with them the resources you've met. And go to the Alzheimer's Association, go to MS Home Care. Yeah, you had a question.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, one thing that I was going to mention was, um, what's good for your brain is good for your heart, and vice versa. And mental stimulation and using your brain, challenging puzzles like doing crosswords or reading or solving a problem or learning a new skill. These are all really great ways to keep yourself mentally engaged and ultimately reduce your risk. Okay. Yeah. Mm. Mhm. Oh, so the question was, is there something equivalent to like a heart transplant, but for Alzheimer's disease with the brain? And the answer is no. Yeah. So the question was, is there something along the lines of stem cells to replenish lost neurons? And the answer is no. So neurons are one of the cells in your body that cannot replicate. So once those cells are gone, they are gone. Sure. Okay. Yes. Yes, absolutely. So I know that there are studies done about how technology affects the way that you sleep. And if your sleep is affected, you're at a higher risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. So, reducing how long you stare in front of a computer screen or that blue light exposure can certainly help sleep and reduce your risk for Alzheimer's disease. So, yes. I don't think we can say that yet. No. Good question.
If you have any, I'm going to end here just because people want to leave. But if you have any questions, I'm sure Claudia will be around. So please feel free to come up and talk to her. Before everyone goes, I want to remind you that we have a couple of vendors here, the Alzheimer's Association one. There's lots of literature that Claudia brought. So please stop by the table and take the information that she brought. We also have with us the M&S Home Care. If anyone's looking for support in terms of caring for a family member, please go to that table and talk with the young man who's here. And I want to thank you all for coming. I do want to let you know that we will have another event in March. That event will be at Fortson High School. I think where's Donna? March 10th? March 10th at 5:30 p.m. And at that event, we're actually going to be talking about how to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's, as well as planning financially for the future if you're worried about somebody in your family with Alzheimer's. So we would encourage you all to attend that one in March. And as Tony said, as Dr. Antonucci said, make sure you share with people that in your lives what you learned here today. And when you come to the next event, bring a friend. We'd love to see more people at our event. So thank you again for coming, and a huge thank you to Claudia Schwenzer for everything. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you. I think the evaluation forms have been passed out, so please make sure you fill those out. That tells us the things that you liked about this event, and it also gives you an opportunity to tell us how you want us to change it in the future. So we'd love to get your feedback.